But after lots of thinking and help that he received from his friends and others, he did realize that God does not need anything big or small from human beings. He is God. In fact, he also wrote in the same poem where he says, God does not need either man's work or his gifts. His state is kingly. Thousand at his bidding do what he needs, or what needs to be done. He also said, those who obey his mild yoke, they serve him best. He knew, in reality, children are just as precious as those who may be grown-ups. It was so heartening to see these young little boys joining their voices and singing praises to their God. It was so beautiful. Children are just as precious in the sight of the Lord as grown-ups. So are those who might be considering themselves insignificant in whatever ways in life. Let's remember, what is insignificant to men is significant to God. Bible is full of passages, by the way. The very first one that comes to my mind is found in Matthew chapter 5, known as Beatitude. The passage starts by saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the merciful." Usually, poor in spirit and merciful individuals are found on the left side of the continuum. Those who are arrogant, those who are not merciful, those who are bosses probably, are found on the other side of the scale. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you, on the left side of the continuum. Matthew 18:11. The Son of Man is come to save that which was lost. Not the ones that were already found, not the ones that were considering themselves leaders, but the people who were lost. So he came to save them. The parable of the lost sheep tells us about this too. He left 99 of them over there, went out after just one. The significance of the insignificant in the sight of the Lord. And of course, the scripture that was read today. The final words, the king shall answer and say, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these brethren, you have done it unto me. Jesus is going to finally say. And then he will give the reward, and he says, enter into the joy of thy Lord. All your life you have been considered insignificant. Now you will be considered significant. 1 Corinthians 1:27. But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. He has chosen the weak things to confound the mighty. Once again, you can see the contrast. Weak, mighty. What is mighty to the world is weak to the Lord. What is weak to the Lord is mighty to the world. All right. To the young ruler, you remember Jesus said, thou lackest one thing. He must have been a great person. He was a rich person, but he says, you lack one thing. Significance of just one. If you have faith like mustard seed, further the scripture says. You don't have to have a big faith to accomplish things, something small. As it was stated earlier, most of my life has been spent in Spicer College. I remember those most wonderful years that we spent, my wife and I, and before her, she came to my life. I was there in the college, in the school. Then particularly I remember instances as a dean of men where at least 300 men resided in those dormitories. And I remember these two groups of young people who would come to the college. A group who came from well-to-do families, rich families, and they kind of stayed together themselves as they walked about, went to church, went to classes. And they had a group of their own. They did things slightly differently than the ones who were on the other side. I remember some young people who came from extremely poor conditions. Some of you might not believe. I remember seeing young men coming to the college with nothing but just the clothes they had on their body. No suitcases, nothing. These were the young people who had to even share toiletries with friends they would make in the dormitories. Now, as a dean, those early days, traditionally, we were expected to get after those who would not go to Vesper's meetings particularly, because that was the end of the week. And many of these men would be found behind the men's hostel, where we had laundry places. And all we had to do, well, I used to do, was to just go walk, take a little walk, and find a number of men washing their clothes. And they had nothing in their body except a towel to wrap around. And when I would invite them to come along to the Vespers, they would say, "Sir, we can't come." Why? Because I have no clothes. The clothes that I have just washed them. I've just kept them on the wire. And with some of them I know it was true. It was a fact. That's all they had. Now today I meet those young people here in this country, a number of them. And I see both the types of these young people here. Those who had enough, those who were plentiful, those who were considered elite. They were the only ones who could probably sing or play instrument. They were always invited to come to the platforms and participate. And there were those others who were neglected, like. Nobody would call them because hopefully they just were no good. But today, in many of these instances, I find those who had very little what the world would give them those days are doing so well in the Lord today. And I also know of some who did very well then. They are no longer with the Lord today. The significance of the insignificant. Brother and sister, the very first vision Ellen G. White had, in that vision she saw a large group of Seventh-day Adventists, large group of people starting on a road, a broad road it was. And the road went upward. Finally, you could see that way at the end, the road became narrower and narrower and narrower. And as the road became narrower, the number of people who had started traveling on that road became fewer and fewer as well. And finally, it was seen that those who reached the road, they took that very narrow road, and finally, they made it to heaven. The significant of the insignificant. May God bless each one of us as we travel through this life's journey as a member of this church. May God bless each one of us to consider that He sees in each one of you, each one of us, something of worth. Let the world may consider something about you and me, but what God sees in us is more than gold. May God bless each one of us as we continue serving Him till the end.